headquarters of common sense.
Talk Radio.
Now, there are occasionally stories when you sort of despair, don't you, of the jobs worths in councils and the people who run this country. And the one we're talking about this morning is a 68-year-old grandmother fined £400 for fly tipping after dropping off some basically charity bags of jumpers and T-shirts next to a charity clothes bank. Now, you and I have probably seen millions of these where nobody's bothered to actually collect them, and there's a whole pile of shoes and clothes and stuff and plastic bags around these recycling centres. But, I mean, on what grounds can they fine her this kind of amount?
Well, if it's fly tipping, which is illegally dumping of waste, it wasn't fly tipping. What she's done is she's put some bags of clothing for a specific purpose alongside a bin that was full, and she's done this on many previous occasions. So it's a sort of practice that the council accepts happens. You know, ideally you want more bins, or the council should empty the bins more frequently to encourage sort of this benevolence. On this occasion, they haven't, so they've hauled her through the system, which is just disgraceful, isn't it? I mean, fly tipping is people who go along in a van and dump out their rubbish. And,
yes.
You know, this is a lady who's taken care to collect clothing that she thinks could be used for other people's benefit, gone to the trouble of putting it by a specific bin that hasn't been emptied, and the council seek war with her. I mean, it's just outrageous. And apparently what they did in the end was they took her into a formal hearing where she was spoken to under caution for 30 minutes.
That's dreadful.
And then she was then given a formal caution which will stay on her record. If I was her, I would be contacting the council and I would be asking in very strong terms to cancel that caution.
Absolutely.
Just to make it clear, it's Wyre Forest District Council. It's not Wyre Council, it's Wyre Forest District Council who have behaved in this appalling manner. You'd think, wouldn't you, that they'd have better things to do with their time. And, you know, this is a time when very soon councils are going to have a lot more power, particularly in relation to motorists. And you'd hope they'd have a discretion, use their brains, use common sense and act proportionately and not try to punish people who are actually doing good.
And it seems as though... I was going to say, it seems as though she was captured on some kind of CCTV camera or the speed camera or something. They had her car registration number somehow, didn't they?
They had that, and they also had the observations of a local shop. And, you know, one can understand fly tipping is deplorable and the council are quite right to deal with it. But that's far removed from what was happening here. Council, and what's happened actually since is the council now have a sign on this particular bin saying, if the bin is full, please take your clothing away with you. Well, that's fair enough. At least they're making it clear. You know, many people who have
bins, if they've taken the trouble to go and put a sign on the bin that's full, how about emptying the bin while they're there?
Well, yeah,
I mean, you know,
that's what you think. I mean, it's staggering. Isn't it? It's just staggering, and I'm afraid it's endemic with some councils across the country. You know, we just want good old-fashioned common sense to prevail and just be reasonable and sensible with people.
Yeah. Well, absolutely. You would think it's pretty straightforward. But also, they must busy themselves with this kind of nonsense in councils up and down the land, and you wonder if they ever get anything actually done. I mean, I've been hearing stories from people in councils for the last few months saying that so few of them are now actually working in the office that they occupy that they're thinking of selling the office.
Yeah, they're selling buildings. They're trying to raise money. Look, they've had a tough time, but certainly in terms of litter collection, which is close to this particular story, I think many councils have just sort of abandoned that completely and will only actually collect, you know, if you make a formal complaint. And so many people, myself included, actually go out on the streets and collect the litter on my road because that's the only way it's going to happen, which is a shame. I mean, to be fair to Macclesfield, if you phone a complaint, they will deal with it, but they won't deal with it automatically. So, you know, it's cash and it's people working away from home. There's strange times. We need to get things sorted out and just get on and do a job, and instead of thinking, well, actually, I'm going to try and avoid doing what I'm paid to do.
Yes. Also, what kind of person reports another person for trying to put out some clothes for charity? I mean, who does that?
Well, there are a few around, aren't they?
Yeah.
But you know, you have that person, but at the end of the day, you've got a dog's body in the council, an official in the council who's saying, actually, we're going to haul this lady in, we're going to issue with her a £400 fine, we're then going to take it to a formal hearing where there are going to be other people present, we're going to question her for 30 minutes. How much does that actually cost the taxpayer? And then we're going to issue a formal caution. I mean, who is making these decisions?
Yeah.
And who ultimately is going to say, actually, we got this really wrong, we're going to cancel it, we're sorry, and actually I'm going to take this as a formal warning myself for behaving in such a deplorable manner. There's no accountability, no responsibility, is there?
No, really
just get away with it.
And what is
unless
this?
they're held to account.
And I mean, obviously, this it rather interestingly takes us into the Downey Street scenario, because I saw the other day that you were saying that you could get all of those people off on the grounds that these penalty charge notices are not really a breach of the law. Is this in this situation? Has she broken the law, or could she refuse? No. Could she refuse to pay?
Absolutely. Well, I understand what she's done is she's now accepted a caution. So as far as the council and she is concerned, the proceedings are closed. When you accept a caution, you're accepting your legal responsibility. So in effect, she's pleaded guilty. She shouldn't have done. Absolutely not. And that's why I would urge her, if she's listening, to contact the council and say, actually, I've got it wrong. Please, as a gesture of goodwill, I'm a lady of 68 years of age. I've actually done nothing wrong. I'm not guilty of this offence. Will you please cancel it?
Right.
If you don't, I'm going to get a High Court order forcing you to cancel it. That will be a horrendous situation for the council to face. It will be hugely expensive.
Yeah.
And they just need to do the decent, sensible thing and just say, actually, we've got it wrong. And then fine, we move on, don't we?
So if she had refused to accept the caution, what would have then been the option for her?
Ultimately, well, the council then have to decide whether to prosecute. She could have a contested hearing.
Right.
That would be in court or a tribunal. And then guilt or innocence will be determined in front of an independent hearing.
Right.
That's what should have happened.
Right.
But obviously, she's a 68-year-old grandlady. Who wants the stress? Who wants the aggravation?
No.
You want to get on with your life. These things are intimidating. And the council have, massive resources at their disposal. Do they really care? It's a corporate body as opposed to a private individual. This is a lady with 5 grandchildren. It's bullying tactics. They've got the law wrong. They've just not behaved. They've not behaved decently. That's it, isn't it?
I think you're absolutely right. And there'll be loads of people listening to this probably who have had similar fines imposed upon for all sorts of mad things, But at the end of the day, let's go back to Downing Street before we let you go. If indeed those investigations require the Metropolitan Police to issue fines, I would suppose they're the ones that would be responsible for it. They've already said they wouldn't release the names of people who they fine. Yeah. You said you could get them all off. What would you do?
Well, look, first of all, if people want to accept fixed penalties, that's their privilege, and they do so under this apparent anonymity. Boris, in fairness, has said if he receives a fixed penalty, he will actually come clean and say, truthfully, yes, I've got one. The legal point, it's 127, one of the Magistrates' Courts Act 1980, and the prosecution has to be within 3 years of the offence. There's no difficulty with that. But then it has to be within 6 months of the prosecutor having sufficient knowledge to know that the prosecution will be successful.
Right.
Now, that we're talking about a party in May 2020 in particular, which was actually published, I think, in the Mail on Sunday or the Daily Mail 2 days later. The prosecution would have to show that they did not have knowledge of this illegal gathering for this prosecution to succeed. Now, I don't know who knows what, but that when people turn up for a party and you're a police officer at the door, my point is this. During lockdown, are you going to allow people with bottles in, or are you actually going to say, I think I need to cover my back here?
Yes.
I'm going to take instructions from a senior officer who may well then get some legal advice, and then the prosecution are on notice. So, it all depends on a certain scenario, but certainly there may be an argument here that the prosecution was on notice a long time that there was an illegal gathering for which people could be successfully prosecuted. If the prosecutor did know that would be a bar to these proceedings because it would impinge that particular piece of legislation.
Yes, but I suppose in order for that all to kick in, whoever was offered the penalty charge notice would have to dispute it, wouldn't they? Which I guess politically might be a little bit tricky.
Correct. They'd have to reject it. There'd then be a hearing. There'd be cost implications, and I imagine a bit of brand damage would be caused by appearing in court, wouldn't they? It wouldn't be good to be getting out in a loophole on this particular.
I think not. No, you and I have seen some pretty bizarre happenings over the course of our careers, but this one really does seem to take the biscuit, doesn't it? The idea that somehow we're all sitting around takes the cake quite somehow, which was also reported at the time in the Times, by the way. And you're kind of going, really? Is this really necessary? Do we really? How much money is it costing for a start?
Well, look at the distraction. Boris has cancelled a meeting with Putin about a war that could take place because he's dealing with could he have his cake and eat it, and talking to his colleagues about whether he should stay in power. I mean, how crazy can it be? It's just a huge distraction, isn't it?
It really is.
You couldn't write it.
You really couldn't make it up. But anyway, it's good to see you, Nick. Thanks very much indeed. Nick Freeman, criminal defence lawyer, author and commentator. Mr. Loophole there as well.
Good talk. Hot talk.
Bold talk. Talk radio.
Listen on your smart speaker.
Watch it live on your smart TV.
The world headquarters of common sense.
Talk Radio.